We just received official confirmation that B-2 bombers are en route from the United States to Guam from White House officials. This is the first official confirmation following satellite imagery already indicating at least 6 B-2 bombers on the airfield at Diego Garcia. What's worth remembering about Diego Garcia is that Diego Garcia is within striking range of Iran. You can see on the map here, Diego Garcia is located south of Sri Lanka. And if you travel towards Iran, you could likely pick up a mid-air refuel just outside of Iranian airspace. Now, what's fascinating is just this morning, Israeli aircraft have begun to bomb facilities that may be the Iranian Defense Forces opportunity to shoot down any aircraft coming along or from the Persian Gulf. Now, why is Iran potentially seeing their missile strikers taken out in this route? Take a look at this map here. Right here in the Arvaz region, this is where we are seeing missile launchers taken out. Now, you can see the Persian Gulf is right here, and here's Qatar. Qatar might end up being one of the places we end up launching refueling missions for our B-2 bombers before they end up encroaching on the Iranian airspace. The flight path our aircraft might end up taking might be across this Arvaz region, which is en route to the Fordow nuclear enrichment facility that everybody has talked about in the news over the last few days. Now, what's remarkable about this is it's an indication of likely coordination between the United States and Israel. And unfortunately, it's also indicative of negotiations not going very well. Again, just this morning, 30 Israeli fighter jets took or participated in striking the Arvaz region. And this comes on top of this satellite imagery from just within the last 48 hours, showing a sudden buildup of U.S. Air Forces and allied air forces arriving, again, just within the last few days here, including what we can visibly see, at least 54 F-16 fighter jets, 22 KC-135s, and 11 C-130s. So we've got cargo aircraft, we've got refueling aircraft, and we've got strike aircraft, as well as obviously our Diego Garcia friends that apparently are already hosting multiple B-2 bombers, with likely more on the way. Google Maps, unfortunately, doesn't show you all those B-2 bombers just yet, but more recent satellite imagery does. Now, why is this important? Well, it comes at the same time as Khamenei and the Iranian delegations that have been negotiating in Geneva are telling us we are not achieving success in negotiations. In fact, demands from the delegations negotiating with Iran seek a complete removal of enrichment capabilities from Iran. However, Iran is not willing to give up any level of enrichment, or at least go down to a level of zero. This is problematic because if Iran says, no, we're not interested in going down to zero, but that's exactly what allied forces are looking for, it increases the likelihood that the unleashing of now these B-2 bombers, officially being confirmed from the White House, and the striking of missile bays en route to the Fordow nuclear enrichment facility suggests that we might actually end up seeing the United States get involved with this conflict with Israel against Iran. At least some of the coordination that we're seeing is starting to suggest this. On top of this, Khamenei is also suggesting that he has assigned someone to take over his position, a cleric to take over his position, should he be assassinated. And multiple other officials inside of the Iranian regime have also already been designated with replacements should they end up being killed or somehow assassinated. This now suggests that we unfortunately aren't in a de-escalating environment anymore. It appears we are escalating. Now, unfortunately, while this escalation is happening, the IAEA is also reporting that no highly enriched uranium was found at Esfahan after it was struck by Iranian airstrikes. Now, why is that problematic? Well, because Iran is expected to hold about 15 to 16 cylinders worth of highly enriched uranium somewhere. Now, the IAEA was tracking these containers, but when Israel started striking Iran, they stopped tracking these because obviously there's now war, and Iran, not only is it less safe for the IAEA, but Iran is suggesting, hey, sorry, wartime, can't allow any inspectors in. Not a surprise, because it gives Iran the potential opportunity to remove these cylinders of highly enriched uranium. Surprisingly, you do not need a lot of it to make a bomb. And that is unfortunately what's scary. In fact, a nuclear energy facility operating for quote-unquote peaceful purposes typically can produce enough plutonium U-239 to produce one bomb per year. And that's for a peaceful purpose. Yesterday, we were talking about how U-238 becomes U-239, and like 5 of you in the comments suggested that I was wrong to say that was because a neutron was gained. It actually gains a proton and becomes plutonium-239. This is true in its final state. However, it's worth noting how you get there is through neutron capture. So you get a U-238 that gains a neutron, becomes unstable, emits beta radiation. Now you remove an electron. What happens when you remove an electron from a neutron? Boom, you get a proton. So that's how you get a more stable form of plutonium-239. But the point of that discussion yesterday was to say that even the peaceful use of a nuclear reactor can produce the weaponry or essentially the ingredients necessary for a broader bomb. The issue now, unfortunately, though, is that it seems there's a growing concern by not only the IAEA for the potential of more strikes against nuclear facilities. We've already seen the strike against Iraq, which was an active reactor with a heavy water reactor, which Israel apparently alerted those in the surrounding area to evacuate before striking. But it suggests that Israel is willing to strike active reactors as well. And now while this heavy water reactor was deemed inactive for energy production and more active for research purposes, wasn't necessarily a Chernobyl-style reactor by any means, people are getting concerned that as negotiations are beginning to fall apart, as the United States is moving significantly more aircraft and weaponry into the region, it's now only a matter of time, unfortunately, before strikes end up taking place against Iran in coordination with the United States and Israel. Unfortunately, just like what we saw with the Israeli essentially invasion into the Gaza Strip in response to those October 7th, 2023 attacks, we were expecting an incursion that would last maybe weeks to months. It's now been over 2 years. We were told that these strikes against Iran should take days to weeks, and we're now walking up to 2 weeks already. So the question is, if the United States gets involved, would it end up emboldening Iran to push for a bomb intentionally to create the same nuclear deterrence that countries like North Korea have, who don't end up getting struck by their neighbors because they have a bomb? It's almost like the bomb breeds peace. The problem with that is, do other countries then feel that they need to breed peace by proliferating nuclear weapons? And this goes against the principles of really the last 50 or 60 or 70 years that, well, Western countries have told us that only nuclear powers should be the ones to continue to have nuclear weaponry, and we should all work to produce fewer nuclear weapons rather than more. Although this comes as China goes, sounds good, bro. We'll make another 100 nukes every single year because, well, that's what they're doing right now. So you're kind of in a little bit of a damned if you do strike Iran and damned if you do situation. And I think that's why some people are looking at Donald Trump as potentially being in a taco position. Is maybe not necessarily in a taco position, but more in a very hard position. Because if you do strike, it potentially sends that signal that we only won't strike you if you have a nuke. But if we don't strike, the strikes that Iran has already sustained and Iran's position that we're not going to go to zero enrichment could just embolden them to finally get to the bomb, which is obviously where we get to concerns over, oh no, what does this mean for Iran potentially arming their rebels, such as the Houthis, with nuclear weaponry? It's also worth getting an update on what's up with the Houthis. The Houthis this morning mentioned that they have threatened to break their May truce with President Trump if the United States targets Iran and actually strikes Iran. Quote, in the event that Americans become involved in an attack and aggression against Iran alongside the Israeli enemy, the armed forces will target their ships and warships in the Red Sea. And this, again, potentially creates additional supply chain snarls, at least for getting back to trading in the Red Sea, but also potentially any of the shippers that are still active in the Red Sea, and obviously oil markets. Now, generally, market-wise, geopolitical issues tend to be a buy the dip. And really, do we expect this to be a near-term shock for markets? No, but if this becomes a prolonged conflict where we start seeing oil prices rise consistently above 100 towards $150 per barrel, because we start getting more disruptions, not only out of the Strait of Hormuz, which some have suggested that Iran might end up planting water mines in the region, or Israel targets even more of Iranian oil tanks, such as those on the Kurg Island, yes, we could start seeing oil prices sustainably rise as this conflict evolves, and unfortunately does not seem to be getting better. Thanks for watching. Appreciate you watching, especially since I got off a run here and I look a little crazy, but thank you so much, and we'll see you in the next one.